Let's understand what just happened that we did, and we did it so quickly. Firstly, we created a sample Android project. Okay, how did we do this? We went to File and say New Android Project. We gave some details and pressed Finished. It created the Android project. We created an Android virtual device that was an AVD. Then we deployed a code on the Android device with the Eclipse IDE by right clicking on the project and saying run as Android application. Now, whenever you do this, the Eclipse IDE calls a utility called as Android Debug Bridge. This Android Debug Bridge runs the program or runs the application that you have made from your Eclipse IDE to the Android device. Okay, so this ADB or the Android Debug Bridge would help us to run programs, copy files, etc. to and from any connected Android device. Means even if I connect an actual Android device on my PC via a USB cable, then too this ADB will do the same thing of running this application from Eclipse on the device directly. So if you want to visualize how the ADB looks like, this is your Android device, this is your computer. In between you have an Android debug bridge which does all the tasks of running the application from Eclipse onto the Android device. Okay, now let's start with the basics of Android, that is activities. Whenever we created the project, we got an option of create a blank activity. Let's see what an activity is. Everything that we view on the screen of Android is an activity. Activities can be created by extending any class by the activity class. So activity class should be the base class, and any class that you want to be an activity should be the derived class. For example, my first activity extends activity. Here my first activity is the derived class, whereas activity is the base class. This syntax will make my first activity as a new activity. Eclipse creates a sample activity for us to start coding. Now each application must have at least one activity. This activity will be the launch point of the application. Okay, so whenever we say we have an application, that application will have multiple activities. All out of these activities, one activity will be the main activity. And what is an activity? Anything that we view on the Android screen is called as an activity. With this knowledge, let's move ahead. We have something called as layouts. Layouts are the UI part of the application. Any content that we see on an Android application is in the form of layouts, and these layouts are very powerful tools that describe the user interface of an application. Now don't get confused by activities and layouts. Activities are purely Java codes. That is, whatever you see on the screen, whatever you touch on the screen is in the form of an activity. But each activity will have one layout. That layout will just decide how controls are placed on the screen. Okay, I hope we are making sense. We have the activity part, that is the Java code that indicates how the user is interacting with the application or how are we performing any activity with the application. Whereas the layouts are the UI part, that is the layouts will describe how all the controls are placed on the screen. Let's take an example of this. If you have used the Facebook application on Android, then you have seen the login screen of Facebook. This login screen is the layout part of the application. It just indicates how controls are placed on the layout. But whenever you click on login, a Java code is running at the background. That Java code will actually inquire the servers of Facebook and give you the output. Okay, so I hope you now make the distinguish between activities and layouts. Activities are the background Java codes and layouts are the front end of the application. Now layouts must be thought very carefully beforehand. Whenever you are creating a layout, the layout must be thought very carefully beforehand. This is because layouts decide the market value of your application. Okay, coming back to our example of Facebook, if you see, before Facebook you had Orkut, you had many websites, but Facebook was a big success. This was because the layout of Facebook was very good. Okay, that is the main reason why we say layouts decide the market value of your application. If your application has thousands of features but the layout is very bad, then that application might not grow in the market. Whereas if your application have 50 features and all those features are very easily accessible, then that layout will make your application at a higher rank in the market. Layouts are described using standard XML files. What is XML? We'll see in the later part of the course, but just understand that layouts are described using standard XML files. These XML files are similar to HTML files, but the tags are extended. We are coming to this in the later slides, don't worry. Eclipse provides us a GUI tool to work with layouts. Now, even if a person who does not know XML can work with layouts, because Eclipse provides us a very good tool to work with these layouts. Layouts can contain buttons, text views, edit text boxes, etc. What are these? This will also be clear. For example, button is something which you press. Text view is something where just text is displayed. Edit text is where you can enter text on your layout. Complex layouts may contain other layouts inside them. As you will be growing your knowledge with Android, you will be able to have more and more complicated layouts where you have a layout inside a layout. Now, this was about layouts. We have studied about activities, we have studied about layouts. We know that activities are Java classes, whereas layouts are XML files. Now let's see what is the R class. In order to link layout elements like button, text view, etc. with the Java code, Android provides us a class named as R and it stands for resources. Okay, so whatever element you add to your layout, that element is given a reference inside this R class, and from this R class you can use this resource inside your Java code. Okay, so the R class acts as a link between your layout and the activities Java code. This R class is present in all Android projects, and every memory element is allocated a memory location. Okay, all layout elements are allocated a memory location, and the R class contains the memory location number for the particular resource. Okay, we'll see this in the let's do it section. So for now, just understand this. You have a R class. This R class contains reference to all the resources that you can have in a project, and with the help of this R class, you will be able to access all the resources in your main Java activity. This is very important. Eclipse creates and updates this R class for us automatically. From the starting, we are saying that Android is very secure. Now let's understand what is the mechanism of security in Android. Android gives free access to every component present on device. That means every application can access every component on the device, but this access has to be confirmed with the user of the application before the application is installed. So whenever you are installing an application, before installing the application will prompt you that I am using all these features of your device. Do you want to continue with the installation? Yes or no. If you feel that that application is asking what it demands for, then you can click on install. It will install the application, else it will not install the application. Okay. So we need to mention all the device component names which we would be using beforehand. If we do not do this, then the application will close unexpectedly when we try to access the given features on the device. To elaborate this point, let's assume that we have an application that is sending SMSs to a number. So if the application is confirming that access of sending SMSs with the user beforehand, then only the application will be able to send the SMS. If the application is not uh, asking for that confirmation before installation and it tries to send a SMS, then the application will close unexpectedly. Okay, that is the main mechanism of security in Android, because every application, if it wants to use the smallest of device features, it has to first inquire those features with the user of the application. If the user confirms those actions, then only the application will be installed, else the application will not be installed. That is the basics behind security in Android. That is, all the applications must first tell the user that I want the access of this component. If the user grants that access, then only the application will be able to use those device components and it will not close unexpectedly. Okay, that was about the security in Android. Now let's look at the Android project manifest. Every Android project has a manifest file. A manifest file is nothing but some additional information or the model file of your project that indicates your project's model. This file contains all the information about the project, like the number of activities in your project. If your project has say 5 activities, one splash screen, one login screen, one home screen, one settings screen and one exit screen, then all these activities have to be mentioned beforehand in the project. All the permissions required by the application also go inside the manifest file. That is, if our application requires access to the camera, then we have to mention this permission inside the manifest file and some other stuff. The manifest file is a bit complicated, but for the start, just understand that the manifest file contains all the activities and it contains all the permissions that are required by a project and some other stuff. It is also a strictly typed XML document. Eclipse creates this manifest file for us automatically but does not update it. Means at the start our application will have one activity only. As we add more activities, we have to add the reference of all these activities inside the manifest file. Eclipse will not do this for us. We have to do this thing manually. Eclipse also provides a GUI tool to edit this manifest file. Okay, that's too much of information that we have decimated. Let's first understand why Android gives such a complicated model. Now, programming in Android requires us to carefully model the application before writing any code. For modeling the application, we must know the architecture and the basics of the Android system. That is why we must make a note of all the given features and mark them as very important for any application. Okay, so let's reiterate. We heard about activities, we heard about layouts, we heard about the R class which links the layouts and the activities, we heard about security in Android, and we heard about the Android manifest. This is very useful for deploying large-scale applications. Now, we might be thinking, why such a complex model? Android works on a model view controller architecture, whereas all the modern devices that you will see like Windows 7, Windows 8, iPhone, BlackBerry 10, all these things work on a model view controller architecture. The model in this case is the application manifest. Okay, the model of the application is the application manifest. The manifest file contains all the permissions. It contains all the activities that your project requires. So that is the model of the application. The view, that is the UI part of the application, which is the layouts, and the controller, which is the Java code of the application, which for your activities. Okay, so each application of Android has a model view controller architecture or a MVC architecture, whereas the model is the application manifest, view is the UI part, that is the layouts, and controller is the Java code of the application. This makes Android one of the closest to desktop based mobile application model. and a similar programming model is used by iPhone development. Okay, so far so good. Let's take a brief look on what is XML. XML is similar to HTML. The HTML indicates hypertext markup language, but XML indicates extensible markup language. In HTML, the tags are fixed, whereas in XML, the tags are not fixed. You can create tags as per your convenience. The meaning of extensible is the same. That is, tags in XML are not fixed. They can be decided by the user depending upon the given application. Why the name markup language? Because the tags need a proper start mark and an end mark for proper syntax. XML is a worldwide standard for transferring of data. If you want to transfer data from one form to other form, you have to do it through XML. One more data format is coming up, that is JSON or Java Simple Object Notation. We are not using JSON anywhere in the course, but for your knowledge, you should know that there is a format similar to XML called as JSON, which is coming up for data exchange. Now, let's go to the basics of layouts. As we have seen earlier, layouts will decide how the controls are arranged on the device screen. Android provides many layout formats. These are, first layout format is called as a linear layout, wherein all the controls are arranged one after the other sequentially, either horizontally or vertically. If the layouts are arranged one below the other, then the layout is called as a vertically oriented linear layout. If the controls are placed one beside the other, then this is called as a horizontal oriented linear layout. Linear layouts are very much used as you will start the programming of Android, but as you will mature in the programming, you will be using something called as relative layouts. Relative layouts indicates controls are placed with respect to each other. That is, if I have the login screen of any application, then I'll have the login, the edit text of login. In the next line, I'll have password, the edit text of password, and I'll have one button of login. So all these controls will be placed with respect to each other. This is called as a relative layout. We'll be learning this layout in quite a bit in the slides to come. Then we have something called as absolute layout, where controls are placed at absolute positions. Okay, means if I want to place a control at say 100 pixel by 100 pixel, then that type of layout will be an absolute layout. This is meant for fixed screen applications, whereas the screen size of the device is fixed. But in the case of Android, this is very rarely used, because Android phones come in variety of sizes from 2 inches to 10 inches. So we'll not be using absolute layout. Then you have something called as table layout, where controls are placed in the form of tables, that is rows and columns. This type of layout is used for representing data. Wherever you want to represent data, then you will be using table layout. Okay, now let's create our own layout. Eclipse provides us a sample layout to work with in our application. This layout can be found inside the res/layout folder of a project. Whenever you'll be creating a project, just double click on the project, you will get a res folder. This indicates the resource folder. Inside this res folder, you have a layout folder. Inside this layout folder, you have a file called as activity main.xml. Just double click on this file, then you'll be able to edit the file. Let's define a layout. If I want a layout like this, then this layout has three controls. The first control is a text view, where you can just see the text. The second control is an edit text, where the user can actually put some text. And third control is a button, where the user can press the button and something will happen. Okay, the layout of this application is a linear layout, which is vertically oriented, because all the controls are placed one below the other. The first control is a text view, second control is an edit text, and third control is a button. You can mark over here that the text view has a text enter name with it. The edit text has a blank text, and the button has a text of say hello. All the three controls are occupying the complete width of the parent. So we have to keep all these things in mind, that the text on the text view is enter name, the text on the edit text is blank, the button has a text of say hello, and this layout is a linear layout in vertical orientation, and all the controls have the layout width as completely filled. Okay, so the complete layout is filled widthwise with all the controls. With this knowledge at our hand, let's move ahead. When we'll double click on the activity me.xml file, the by default layout that Eclipse start with is called as a relative layout, but we have to change this to linear layout because in our application we are using a linear layout. So to change the layout type, we'll go to the activity me.xml file, right click on the layout and select change layout and set the layout type as linear layout vertical. Okay, so I'll just write, if I'll double click on this activity main, a layout will open. I right click on the layout and click on change layout. It will give me a screen where I can select linear layout vertical and press on OK. Okay, this will make the layout to be linear layout. Now how to add controls? In our case we have three controls: text view, edit text and button. So to add the controls, we have to drag the controls from here and drop them here. For example, if I want to have this text view is over here, this button is over here, this edit text in the center will be obtained from this palette of text fields. You have to just click on this text fields, this will open, and drag and drop the edit text over here. So far so good. Let's change the control properties. We have to make sure that the text on all the controls is proper and the size of the controls is proper. So let's first change the size of the controls. To change the size, right click on a control and say layout with match parent. So we have the button. I right click on the button and say layout with match parent. This will make the width of this button to match the parent's width. Okay, the parent being the screen over here. So when you right click and say layout with match parent, it will fill the complete parent. This is very important. You have to give a unique ID to each control. If you have three controls, you have to give a unique ID to each of these three. This is because when we'll be accessing these controls in the Java code, this ID will be required over there. To give the ID is very simple. Right click on the control and say edit ID. Okay, it is rightly mentioned over here. Each control must be given a unique ID which identifies the control in the Java code. Okay, so whenever we'll be written the Java code for this application, then we'll be requiring each of these controls to have a different ID. So we have three controls. We'll keep three different IDs for three of these controls. Let me give you a hint for giving IDs to the controls. Now always give IDs with reference to the control which you are adding. For example, if you are adding a button, the ID of the button must start with btn. In our case, the button is saying say hello, so we'll give the ID of the button to btn say hello. Similarly, we have to give the IDs of all edit texts starting with txt, and the IDs of all text views should start with lbl, and so on. That was about the IDs of the controls. Let's change the text on the controls. Changing the text is also very easy. Just right click on a control and say edit text and enter the text that we want for the control. So as you have seen over here, I have given the text of this first field to be enter name, and I right click on the button to say edit text. When I click on edit text, a dialog box should appear, and inside the dialog box I should just give the text that I want on the button. In this case, I want the text to be say hello. Okay, that's our final layout. if you are following on, then you will be able to appreciate that the layout that we started with just had three controls: enter name, an edit text, and a button. The first control is a text view with the ID txt enter name. The second control is a edit text with the ID txt name, and the third control is a button with the ID btn say hello. Okay. The first control's ID is lbl enter name, second control's ID is txt name, and third control's ID is btn say hello. Now to run the application, we have to just simply right click on the application and say run as Android application. So we had the hello Android project. I right clicked on this and say run as Android application. And as you'll be able to see that the layout will run, and this is your application where you can enter your name and you can say hello. Nothing will happen as of now because we have not written the Java code of it, but you have to appreciate the fact that we are able to run a sample layout on the screens of Android. So let's do it in actual practice and see what do we get at the output.
Let's do it for the next part of your application, wherein we have to create a new layout. Layouts are present inside the res/layout folder. Inside this layout folder, you have your activity main. You can go ahead and double click on the activity main. This will show the layout. This is the same layout which you see on the screen. Okay, so if I'll change this layout, the layout on the screen will change when I run the application next time on the device. To do it, let's first right click on the layout and say change layout. In this, I have to select linear layout vertical because we have to add all the controls linearly in a vertical fashion. I'll click on OK. So it has changed the layout of my application. I'll click on this hello world and right click and say delete, so that it will delete that control because I don't want the control over here. Now I want three controls. I want a text view, an edit text, and a button. So let's drag the text view from here and drop it on the main layout. Go to text fields and add an edit text from here to the main layout. Again go to form widgets, click on button and drag and drop. Our layout is almost ready, but we have to make some changes. First of all, the width of the button is quite less. This width is called as wrap content because the width will change depending upon the content on the control. I want this width to be match parent or fill parent, that is, it should fill the complete parent width-wise, but height should not fill the parent, height should be wrap content only. So I'll right click on this and say layout width, match parent. It will fill the complete parent. I can click on save. Then I want to change the text on the first text view. So click, right click and say edit text. Let's give the text on this as enter your name and press OK. It will change the layout to enter your name. I want to change the text on the button, so I'll say right click, edit text. Let me give the text on the button to be say hello. Press OK. It will give me the layout as we want. You note one point that whenever you change something on your layout or on your Java code, a small star mark appears over here. Let me show that to you. If I'll right click and say edit text and I'll just say hello, OK. See this, you get a small star mark over here. This star mark indicates your application or your file has changed. You have to save your code. So to save that, you can either press this button or you can press Ctrl S. Okay, saving your code is very essential. Always save your code whenever you have made a change to your code. The third thing that we want to do over here is change the IDs of the controls. IDs are nothing but identifiers or unique names that we give to all our controls. Let's right click on enter your name and say edit ID. There's a hint to give the IDs. The ID of all text views must start with LBL, and then you can give the actual ID. IDs are variable names, so they must not have a space bar. Let me give the ID of this as LBL enter name. As you can see, we have given the ID in a camel casing. Whenever a word is ending, the next word is starting with a capital case. This is good for readability. If you can take an example, if I give the ID as LBL enter name, this is not that readable, but if you just write LBL E capital and N capital, this becomes much more readable. So this is the main utility of camel casing. It makes your variables and functions and classes names much more readable. Click on OK. Let's give the ID to the edit text. The ID of the edit text must be txt, starting with txt, and name. Name because we will be entering a name over there. Then right click on say hello, edit ID, btn say hello. I hope we are clear with this. Now the layout is ready. To actually see the layout in working, you have to again right click on the project and say run as Android application. Make sure that you right click on the project and not on the layout, because you have to run your project, not the layout. Layout is a part of your project that will be running as you will run the project itself. So I hope it is uploading it on the emulator and it is installing it. Now you will be able to get that thing up and running over here. Can you see anything happening on the screen? No, because the application is not functional. In the next part, we'll be seeing how to make the application